The small town of Havenwood was nestled deep within a valley, surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, a haven of peace and tranquility. The night was eerily quiet, with not a soul in sight. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the distant hum of the wind. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oaks that lined Main Street, their branches swaying softly in the night air. Shadows danced in the moonlight, creating an unsettling atmosphere. The pale light of the moon cast long eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The old clock tower struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the deserted streets. Each chime seemed to linger in the air, adding to the sense of foreboding. A lone dog barked in the distance, the sound quickly swallowed by the night. It was as if the darkness itself was absorbing all noise, creating an oppressive silence. The houses stood silent, their windows dark and empty. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. A thick fog began to roll in, obscuring the moon and casting an eerie pall over Havenwood. The fog moved like a living entity, creeping through the streets and enveloping everything in its path. The residents of Havenwood were sound asleep, unaware of the horrors that were about to unfold. They lay in their beds, dreaming of peaceful days and quiet nights. They dreamt of peaceful days and quiet nights, of a world where nothing ever changed. They dreamt of simple pleasures and familiar faces, of moments spent with loved ones and the comfort of routine. They dreamt of a world untouched by the darkness that lurked just beyond their doorsteps, a world where the sun always shone and the nights were always calm. They dreamt of a Havenwood that would soon cease to exist, a Havenwood that was about to be changed forever. The fog continued to thicken, swirling around the houses like a restless spirit. It moved with an almost sentient purpose, as if it knew what was coming. The air grew heavy with a strange metallic scent. It was a smell that hinted at something unnatural, something not of this world. A low growl echoed from the outskirts of town, barely audible above the rustling leaves. It was a sound that sent shivers down the spine, a sound that spoke of danger. It was a sound that no one in Havenwood had ever heard before, a sound that was both alien and terrifying, a sound that would soon become all too familiar, a sound that would haunt their dreams and their waking hours, a sound that heralded the arrival of something terrible, something unimaginable, something that would change Havenwood forever. The tranquility of Havenwood was about to be shattered. The peace that the residents had taken for granted was about to be destroyed. The silence of the night was about to be broken. The stillness that had enveloped the town was about to be disrupted. The peace of the town was about to be destroyed. The darkness had arrived, and with it a new and terrifying reality. Old Man Hemlock, the town's night watchman, sat in his small booth at the edge of town. The booth was his sanctuary, a place where he felt in control, even in the dead of night. He was sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the radio. The familiar tunes were a comfort, a reminder of normalcy in the quiet, uneventful nights. A sudden noise startled him. It was a sharp contrast to the usual stillness, a jarring interruption that made him sit up straight. It sounded like a low moan coming from the woods. The sound was eerie, almost otherworldly, sending a chill down his spine. He dismissed it as an animal and went back to his coffee. After all, the woods were full of creatures that could make strange noises in the night. But the moaning continued, growing louder and more insistent. It was as if the night itself was trying to tell him something, something he couldn't ignore. He peered out into the fog, trying to see the source of the disturbance. The fog was thick, making it difficult to see anything clearly. He saw a figure emerge from the trees. It was barely visible at first, just a shadowy outline against the mist. It was moving slowly and unsteadily. Each step seemed labored, as if the figure was struggling to move forward. It looked human, but there was something wrong with its gait. The way it moved was unnatural, almost mechanical. It stumbled and lurched, its arms outstretched. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying, like a scene from a nightmare. He squinted, trying to get a better look. His heart was pounding in his chest, a mix of fear and curiosity driving him to keep watching. As the figure drew closer, he could see its face. The details became clearer, and with each step his dread grew. It was pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. The face was a mask of death, devoid of any life or warmth. A trickle of blood ran down its chin. The sight of the blood confirmed his worst fears. This was no ordinary person. A wave of fear washed over him. He felt paralyzed, unable to move or think clearly. He knew instinctively that this was no ordinary person. This was something else, something monstrous, something dead. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He fumbled for his radio, his hands shaking. The device felt heavy and cumbersome in his trembling hands. He tried to call for help, but his voice caught in his throat. Panic was setting in, making it hard to form words. He could only stare in horror as the figure continued to approach. Each step brought it closer, and with each step, his fear intensified. The moaning grew louder, joined by other moans from the woods. The chorus of sounds was overwhelming, a symphony of terror. More figures emerged from the trees, all moving with the same unsettling gait. The sight of them filled him with a sense of impending doom. They were all pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. They were all dead. They were all zombies. Havenwood was under attack. The night had turned into a nightmare, and Old Man Hemlock was at the center of it. The first zombie reached the edge of town, its lifeless eyes scanning the deserted streets. It began to shamble down Main Street, its movements slow but relentless, driven by an insatiable hunger. Its moans echoed through the silent houses, a haunting sound that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. The other zombies followed, their numbers growing with each passing moment, a relentless tide of death and decay. The fog swirled around them, obscuring their movements and adding to the sense of dread that permeated the air. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, a nauseating odor that clung to everything it touched. Inside their homes, the residents of Havenwood began to stir, their peaceful slumber shattered by the sounds of the undead. They heard the moans, the shuffling feet, the unnatural sounds that invaded the stillness of the night, filling them with a growing sense of dread. They looked out their windows, their eyes widening in horror at the sight that greeted them, a nightmare come to life. The undead were walking among them, their presence a harbinger of the nightmare that had begun to unfold. Sarah, a young woman living on the outskirts of town, was awakened by the sound of breaking glass, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked out her window and saw a zombie trying to climb through her neighbor's window, its rotting hands clawing at the frame. She screamed and ran to wake her family, her voice filled with panic and fear. Her husband David grabbed his shotgun and barricaded the front door, his face set in grim determination. Their children huddled together, their faces pale with fear, their eyes wide with terror. The whispers of the undead had reached Havenwood, a chilling reminder of the horror that now surrounded them. The moans of the zombies echoed through the streets, a constant reminder of the terror that had begun to unfold. The fight for survival had begun, a desperate struggle against an enemy that knew no fear, no pain, and no mercy. The zombies began to break into homes, their rotting hands smashing through windows and doors. The screams of the townsfolk filled the night air. The streets of Havenwood became a battleground, a scene of chaos and carnage. The living fought against the dead, a desperate struggle for survival. David fired his shotgun at the zombie trying to break into their home, blowing its head off, but more zombies were coming, drawn by the noise. Sarah grabbed a kitchen knife, her hands shaking. She knew they couldn't stay here. They had to escape. Across town, Sheriff Brody organized a small group of survivors. They barricaded themselves inside the police station, hoping to hold out until help arrived. But help was a long way off, and the zombies were relentless. They pounded on the doors, their moans a constant reminder of the horror that surrounded them. The siege of Havenwood had begun. The town was overrun by the undead. The survivors were outnumbered and outgunned. Their only hope was to escape. Section 5. Escape from Havenwood. David, Sarah, and their children made a run for it, dodging zombies as they raced through the streets. They reached their car and sped away, leaving the horrors of Havenwood behind. They drove through the night, the sounds of the undead still ringing in their ears. Sheriff Brody and his group managed to escape the police station, using a back exit to slip past the horde of zombies. They commandeered a school bus and drove towards the highway, hoping to find safety in the outside world. The escape from Havenwood was a desperate gamble. Many didn't make it. They fell victim to the relentless horde, their screams swallowed by the night. But for those who survived, the escape was a victory, a testament to their courage and resilience. Section 6. A desperate gamble. David, Sarah, and their children reached the highway. They followed the flow of fleeing cars towards the nearest city. The highway was a chaotic scene of abandoned vehicles and panicked drivers. The threat of the undead still loomed large. Sheriff Brody's bus ran out of fuel a few miles outside of Havenwood. They were stranded, surrounded by the undead. They barricaded themselves inside the bus, preparing for a final stand. Section 7. The Crossroads of Fate. David's car was involved in a multi-car pileup caused by panicked drivers. Sarah was injured. David had to make a choice, stay and protect his family or seek help, risking leaving them vulnerable. Sheriff Brody spotted a passing military convoy. He risked everything, running through the horde of zombies to reach the convoy. His gamble paid off. The soldiers rescued the remaining survivors on the bus. Section 8. Havenwood lost. Havenwood fell silent. The houses stood empty, the streets littered with the remains of the fallen. The town was lost to the undead, a chilling testament to the night of horror. David, unable to find help, returned to his injured wife and children. They were gone. The car was empty. Only a trail of blood remained. Section 9. A glimmer of hope. Sheriff Brody, safe with the military convoy, looked back at the burning remnants of Havenwood. A glimmer of hope flickered within him. He had survived. He had helped others survive. The fight was far from over, but they had lived to fight another day. But the memory of Havenwood, the lost town, would forever haunt him.